Chapter 15, The Choreographed Usher, Part 1, Flipperama. As any historian will tell you, Flipperama was first created nearly 200,000 years ago on stone tablets. These cheesy animations were lots of fun to flip, but they were so heavy they often resulted in smashed thumbs and broken fingers. Ancient Egyptians, desperate to solve this problem, invented papyrus around 3500 BC so that Flipperamas could be flipped safely by everybody. So please enjoy this ancient tradition, now improved and enhanced by the modern-day miracle of paper. Boulder Bash. Rhinoblasty. And Timbertraw. Oh my private! Chapter 16. What really caused the Ice Age?
Is that all you
moaned Tippy as he fell to his battered, smoldering knees. Tippy's giant robotic pants might have been a technological marvel, but they were no match for a cave person's cleverness. Tippy was in trouble, but he still had one last trick up his sleeve. He reached out his control panel and pressed the Freezy B4000 button. Suddenly, the battered top of the RoboPants opened up, and the Freezy B4000 rose menacingly from the robotic innards. Instantly, a massive burst of ice blasted at the cave people. Fortunately, they all got out of the way just in time, but the ice kept blasting anyway.
What's wrong with this thing?
Said Tippy as he pressed the Freezy B4000's off button repeatedly. The button was stuck, so Tippy pulled the emergency shut-off lever. But that one budged either.
It's almost as someone has just tampered with my control panel.
Tippy, unaware that going across the floor at that very moment was someone who had just tampered with the control panel. Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy, still angry they had been betrayed by his treacherous twin, had rigged the Freezy B4000 so they could never be turned off. Now the ice beam was going berserk. Glaciers from synthetic ice programmed to last for 70,000 years, cascaded from Tippy's Freezy B4000, encasing the trees and securing his robotic feet to the frozen ground. Like in Underpants Book 9, when Captain Underpants did the old, I'm hiding under this, I'm hiding one of your body parts thing. Come on, go ahead, give it your best shot, and then be using it on their own body part. Remember that moment? Anyway, things were getting out of control. Tippy quickly crawled onto his command center, desperately trying to figure out a way to turn off the spewing icebergs. This was Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy's chance. He reached out with his rubber gloves and grabbed the Gucci Gover Dusty. Then with a mighty leap, he jumped to the opening at the top of the robotic legs and hopped down to the frosty ground below. The ice was spreading at a dangerous rate. Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy needed to act fast. With no time to spare, he grabbed a piece of bubble gum from his pocket, chewed it up, read the comic of the wrapper, then jammed the sticky bubble gum into the bun of the Gucci Gover Dusty. Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy. It's exactly what happened. A continuous stream of gross energy burst forth from the goose-shaped contraption. Quickly, Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy jumped into the energy beam and grew to a presence 30 feet tall. Awesome! Cried Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy jumped in front of the beam again and again, like a child leaping through a lawn sprinkler. Each time he hit the beam of energy, he grew another 30 feet.
I'm here!
Cried Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy, who was now towering above the earth at an impressive 120 feet. He reached down to pick up the Gucci Gover Dusty with the probe above.
Just a few more zaps and I'll be whoops!
Cried Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy as the Gucci Gover Dusty slipped out of his rubber glove and come down over the thick ice below him. Unfortunately, the continuously zapping beam of energy was now pointed directly at the giant amount of ice, which caused it to grow and expand and spread out even farther. Quickly, the ice began pushing its way east across the Ohio Valley and west into the part of the earth that would one day be known as Indiana. Then it began shoving its way north into Michigan and Canada and beyond. An accidental glacial period was developing rapidly, and Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy needed to get out of there fast if he wanted to avoid it. And it looks like Silver Mega Tippy is supposedly dead. Now, Chapter 17. Have a nice day. Get it? Because have a nice day. Have a nice day. Mix it up a bit. Anyway, George and Hill grabbed their pets and ran as fast as they could to escape the rapidly spreading ice field. But the cave buddies were right behind them. Quick, Cracker, said George. You've got to take still and get out of here. It's your only hope. But something was wrong with Cracker. The usually perky pterodactyl seemed to be getting sick. They even kept it cold for Hill. He's not used to the freezing temperatures. Soon they came upon the massive waterfall where Mr. Krabs was tied up. The ice was already beginning to turn the flowing water into frozen slush. We gotta rescue Mr. Krabs! But there's no time, Hill. We'll all get froze. We don't have a choice, we can't just leave him here. George and Hill ran toward Mr. Krabs and began pulling at the vines and holding him in place. When the cave people saw what the boys were trying to do, they also stopped running and came forward to help. But it was too late. The ice got closer and closer as everyone pulled desperately at the vines in the rapidly freezing water. The frigid, slushy water wrapped around Harold's shirt and his thick ice encased George's body. Oh, whoa. They held as he shivered in the rapidly expanding permafrost. At least we tried our best. Goodbye. The George as the ice flowed up around his face and covered the top of his head. The end had finally covered George and Harold. It was all over. The only hope they had left was that maybe someday in the future, an archaeologist would dig up their fossilized bones and have a lot of explaining to do. But even that hope seemed far-fetched at best. Chapter 18. Something much less far-fetched. Crash! Suddenly, the ice around Georgia Hill and their cave buddies shattered with a mighty karate chop. You don't think I'd leave you behind, did you? Said Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy as he scooped everyone up with one gigantic shovel of his rubber glove. Everyone held on to one another for warmth as Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy trudged south across the frosty glaciers. It was about this time that Georgia Hill realized that Mr. Krabs' face was no longer wet, and had been freeze-dried along with everything else around them. So they snapped their fingers, and suddenly a miraculous hero returned. Gee, it's a bit nippy today, said Underpants. Forget about that, no, said George, shivering. Quickly, he and Harold filled Underpants in on the severity of the situation, and before long, they all had a plan. Underpants flew out of Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy's rubber glove and grabbed his massive belt buckle. With one sensational swoosh, Underpants ripped Tippy's legs, bell and all, right off his rubber legs.
Hey, no fair!
Screamed Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy, who, as he stood shivering in his gigantic robotic boxer shorts. Underpants quickly tied the ripped pants and legs in a knot and told everybody to climb aboard. Soon all the good guys were tucked securely into the polyester/cotton blend trousers and flying someplace safe and warm. They zipped across the vast ocean and finally came to a place that was not covered with ice. Underpants swooped down and landed near the Chevet-Pont d'Arc cave in southern France. George and Harold said goodbye to their cave people friends. We sure hope you like your new home here, said George. Keep drawing, said Harold, and take care of our pals, Crackers, and Sulu, okay? Wait a minute, said George. We can't leave for pets here. Crackers is sick. He needs to see a doctor. Oh, yeah, said Harold. I almost forgot. We've got to get to the future somehow. Quickly, Underpants flew George and Harold and Crackers and Sulu back to the frozen glaciers of North America. If they were ever going to get back to modern times, Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy was their best bet. Chapter 19, The Vow. When our 5 heroes finally reached Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy, he didn't seem at all surprised to see them.
I'm not at all surprised to see you,
says Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy as he stepped casually from his water bottle.
I'll bet you guys want to ride Back to the Future, don't you?
We sure do, said Underpants. Gee, that would be swell. Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy pointed his water bottle at Underpants' face and squeezed. Splash! Well, what the heck is going on here? Said Mr. Krabs as our 5 heroes began falling to the frozen ground below. Ah! Screamed Harold. We're doomed! Fortunately, Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy caught them before they hit the ground. But unfortunately, they had something even worse in mind for them than a 120-foot drop to their deaths. As Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy set his Tico Touch over lumber for a day in the upcoming future, that being 206,806 years in the future, George and Harold bemoaned their continually recurring predicament. Well, here we are again, said George. Back in the same mess we always end up in. I know, said Harold. It seems like every time we crack a joke or make a comic book, something terrible happens. You know, said George, if we ever get out of this mess, I think we should stop goofing around all the time. Yeah, I agree, said Harold. We need to quit making comic books and start paying more attention to our schoolwork. And as blue crackling light began to envelop them, George and Harold made a vow to change their ways. They pledged to give up pranks, jokes, and comic books, and then they promised to begin taking life seriously and start acting like responsible grown-ups. Wow, George, as they all disappeared on the crackling whirling of liquid time. I feel more mature already. Me too, said Harold. Chapter 20, 30 years from now. Well, this book canonically takes place in 2004, so it should be really 8 years from now, because I'm filming this video in 2026. Anyway, suddenly a giant ball of blue lightning exploded in the southern end of a busy Midwestern city. George and Harold looked around them and saw the familiar sights of cars and houses and fast food restaurants, or instead of IHOP, it says, I hope this food doesn't kill me. We're home, cried George. It sure seems that way, said Harold. But how come everything is so old?
Because we're not back where we started.
Laughed Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy.
We're 30 years in the future. No, 8 years in the future.
Why do we go to the future? Asked George.
Because
Said Tippy.
the last time I got rid of Captain Underpants, the whole world was destroyed. I just wanted to make sure that the world could survive the next 30 years, no, 8 years without him. And it looks like it can.
Tippy marched over to the elementary school and placed George and Harold and their 2 pets on the ground.
Get comfortable, boys.
Tippy.
I'm about to destroy Captain Underpants once and for all, and I want you kids to have the best seats in the house.
George and Harold looked up in horror. Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy began knocking Mr. Crump around like a beanbag. I can't watch, said Harold as he petted his pet pterodactyl, who always seemed to be getting sicker. Sulu scampered around the playground, finding twigs and branches and leaves and weaving them into a nest to help keep Crackers warm. Remember, said George, if we ever get out of this mess, we're going to straighten up and start acting like grown-ups. That's right, said Harold as he placed Crackers into the warm nest that Sulu had made. We're going to be responsible and mature from now on. As Tippy kicked Mr. Krupp around like a soccer ball, George and Hale got distracted by a loud commotion behind them. Two teachers were yelling at the students on the playground, instructing them all to stop paying attention to the fierce struggle raging above them, and demanding that they straighten up and start acting like grown-ups. But wait a minute, why aren't George and Hale doing anything to help Mr. Krupp? Then again, he is in Mr. Krupp mode, and after all that he's done to these kids, why exactly would they want to help him? Also, how does he stand a chance against this guy? But also, Slighty Younger Tiny Tippy, this guy doesn't even know that he's Captain Underpants. You are revenge on Captain Underpants, not Mr. Krupp. If you're gonna be like, oh, I can't have my other selves destroy Captain Underpants, even though they're me, then surely you want him to be in Captain Underpants mode when you're kicking his butt. Anyway, as the battle intensified, the obnoxious teacher screamed louder and louder, hurling threats and insults at the curious students. Boy, I sure wish those two teachers would chill out, said George. I know, said Harold. They're yelling so loud I can't even hear the fight. Suddenly, a rusty green 2034 Honda Civic pulled into the parking lot. A familiar-looking character came storming out. See, I told you this took place in 2034. Anyway, it was Mr. Krupp, only this was a 30-year-older version of Mr. Krupp. He was wrinklier than George and Harold were used to, with a scruffy white beard and mustache, and pants pulled up to his armpits. Mr. Krupp marched toward the playground, opened his mouth, and screamed four friends and sent shivers down George and Harold's spines. Mr. Beard! Mr. Hodgson! George and Harold froze. Oh no! Mr. Harold! Oh, Mr. Krupp recognized us! What are we gonna do? Asked George. Oh yeah, we're gonna get out of this mess! Old Mr. Krupp marched toward George and Harold, getting closer and closer as they shivered in horror. Then old Mr. Krupp walked past George and Harold, continued walking toward the playground. Mr. Beard! Mr. Hodgson! He screamed again. Get those kids inside right now! Who is he talking to? Asked George. I have no idea, said Harold. Finally, the two screaming teachers turned around. Chapter 21. George and Harold's worst nightmare. Do you know that feeling you get when your stomach sinks? It usually occurs just after the realization that something bad has happened or is going to happen. People often feel this way when they discover they forgot to study for big tests, or they're going to miss the school bus, or the giant gulp of milk that they just swallowed expired 3 weeks ago. Now imagine that feeling magnified about 1 trillion times. This is the feeling that occurred in George and Harold's stomachs when the two obnoxious screaming teachers turned around. It was them. More precisely, it was future versions of themselves. George and Harold grown up to be teachers, but they weren't the nice, wonderful, imaginable teachers that you might be used to. No, sir. George and Harold had evolved to the terrifying, boring, invincible teachers that they were used to. Mr. Krupp squished between 40-year-old Harold and 39 and 3/4-year-old George and slapped a sweaty arm around each of them. I sure am glad you fellas are here, said Mr. Krupp. It's a tough job making everybody miserable, isn't it? It sure is, boss, said 40-year-old Harold. You know it's hard to believe that you guys used to be the craziest kids in the school, said Mr. Krupp. Thank goodness you both started taking life seriously. Yeah, said 39 3/4-year-old George. One day about 30 years ago, we saw the error of our ways, so we made a vow to straighten up and fly right. Yep, said 40-year-old Harold. From then on, it was nothing but serious study, strict discipline, and I am kids content! George and Harold looked nervously at each other as their adult doubles continued screaming at the unfortunate children on the playground. Remember that vow we just made to stop goofing around and start acting more like grown-ups? Asked Harold. Yeah, said George. I think we should vow a new vow that unvows the old vow we just vowed, said Harold. Let's get vowing, said George. That kind of reminds me of those skateboards saying dude. Like, dude is the only word in their vocabulary. Anyway, so as the terrifying battle raged above their heads, George and Harold shook hands and promised to always be themselves. They pledged to keep goofing around, make even more comic books, and to stop taking life so darn seriously. Let's daydream more too, said George. Yeah, said Harold. Enough of the sitting still and paying attention stuff. As George and Harold vowed their new vows, something strange began to happen. A soft wind started to blow, the sound of wind chimes began to tinkle in the air, and the grown-up versions of George and Harold slowly disappeared. They vanished gradually at first. Then after about a minute or so, Mr. Krupp was left standing there all by himself. Wow, said George. You mean it's that easy? All you have to do is make up your mind and stick to it, and you can change the future? Yeah, I guess so, said Harold. George and Harold walked up to old Mr. Krupp, who was looking a little confused, and snapped their fingers. Suddenly, a familiar smile stretched across old Mr. Krupp's face. Well, said George, pointing out to the terrifying battle exploding above their heads. What are you waiting for? Yeah, said Harold. You're getting your butt kicked out there. Go up yourself. Quickly, old Mr. Krupp tore off his clothes, dashed into school, grabbed a red curtain from his office, and flew out of his window with a triumphant, "Oh!" Old Counterfeits immediately rescued Mr. Krupp and brought him back down to the ground. Whoa, I'm sure glad that's over with, said Mr. Krupp. Relax, Bob, said George. You're just getting started. And with a snap of George and Harold's fingers, Mr. Krupp returned to his heroic self once again and flew into the sky to fight alongside his future self.